Well, I'm super excited to get you out here to talk about and celebrate your new book, Healthy High Protein, because everybody's talking about protein these days. It's almost become like, it almost worries me that it's going to be written off by some as a fad because of just the hype surrounding protein. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can get into why focusing on protein is not in fact hype, why there is actual merit to it, and merit beyond just muscle, merit to, in terms of longevity, in terms of brain health, in terms of bone health, et cetera.
Yeah. So I was definitely one of those people, perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, that thought protein was overhyped and actually we need to be focusing on fiber and anti-inflammatory foods and all the rest of it. But it was during my nutritional medicine master's that I just completed last year, it's been going on for like 5 years, where I actually had the realization that I was under-consuming protein myself. So just to set the context, the last 10 years, I've been talking through healthy diets and how food can help mitigate things like type 2 diabetes, prevent dementia, et cetera, et cetera. But what I found was whilst I was having everything quote unquote right, like colorful diet, anti-inflammatory, Mediterranean style, enough fiber, etc. It was during a lecture where one of the professors was talking about ergogenic acids and sports nutrition. And he talked about like the requirements of protein for athletes or people who regularly work out. 2 to 3 times per week is probably what he was talking about at that point. And I thought, let me figure out how much protein I require. And I figured out that even at the lower level that we'll talk to in a minute, at 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per 24 hours, I was massively under consuming protein. I was focusing on protein from things like lentils and beans, which are actually not that high in protein. Plus they have, some gaps in the amount of amino acids that we require over a 24-hour period. And that's when I realized, I need to focus on getting more protein personally. And that led me down this sort of, windy road of the research looking at protein over the last 10 years, rather than the studies that have actually informed dietary guidelines 30, 40 years ago. And when I started consuming more protein myself, energy levels improved, recovery after workouts improved, focus improved, cravings went down. My weight was pretty stable anyway, but I had these short-term benefits. And then looking at the long-term studies like you were alluding to, brain health, longevity, muscle, metabolism, these are all things that correlate with improved outcomes later on in life, which is something that I'm trying to optimize considering I just turned 40 this year. So I think this dismissal of protein being a topic of conversation that we need to be having is not really reflective of the current science. And actually we can have our cake and eat it. We can talk about fiber, we can talk about gut health, we can talk about anti-inflammatory diets, and we should also be talking about good, healthy, quality protein as well.
What would you say are the biggest roadblocks to getting adequate protein today?
I think breakfast is a real area where people don't consume enough protein. So if you look at the amount of protein that we should be consuming every 24 hours, like I'm 75 kilos, I work out most days, and I'm not quite over the 50-year-old threshold. I'm 40, but I definitely need to be consuming enough protein. And at the higher level, which is what I'm aiming for, I need to be getting 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per 24 hours of protein. So my requirements are at minimum around 130, 140 grams. If I don't consume a good amount of protein at breakfast, then I'm really relying on getting a lot of protein at lunch and dinner time. And a lot of people just don't have the capacity to consume that much across 2 different meals. So I think one of the biggest roadblocks is not using breakfast as an opportunity to contribute to that 24-hour intake of protein. If you look at the breakfast aisles, mainly refined cereals, high sugar, high refined carbohydrates, low protein. If you look at most of the breakfast products that are offered, particularly on the go and as convenience options, they tend to be low protein, which is why they're not satiating as well, which is why we tend to be hungry at like mid-morning, 10:30, 11 a.m. And so I think this is probably one of the areas that I talk about in the book, actually, where people should be focused on getting enough protein. And it's funny, we started this conversation talking about the full English breakfast. If you look at a typical full English breakfast, aside from, the high amount of fat and the calories and all the rest of it, which is definitely going to be detrimental at the start of your day, from a protein perspective, it's pretty good.
It's pretty damn good. Yeah, amen. No, you're so right that the way most people start their breakfasts in the developed world, it's essentially like dessert. You're front loading your day with dessert.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that leads to a number of poor choices further down the line as well. So if you think about my typical breakfast would have been, prior to 2015, a yogurt, berries, thinking, it's pretty good. It's not bad. But you break it down from the lens of protein, that's probably given me around 15 grams of protein, 20 at max, if I haven't optimized that meal with protein in mind. If you look at other people's breakfasts, like cereals and stuff, like we're talking less than 10 grams. So what happens when you don't have enough protein at breakfast, aside from not hitting your total daily number? Well, your body is still signaling to you that you need to consume protein. So your hunger signals are on, which means you have cravings, which means that when you're at your desk or when you're at work and when you don't have the convenience of being near your kitchen, you start grabbing whatever you can. Snacks, gummies, chocolates, biscuits, like we have a lot of in the UK. So this is what leads to poor decisions further down the line, because you're just not satisfying your body's innate desire for protein. There is something called the protein leverage hypothesis that states if you don't consume enough protein to meet your body's requirements, because protein is so important to your body, your brain will signal to you to go out and get food. And this is why people struggle a lot with overconsumption of energy as well, because if we don't get enough protein, we're going to be constantly hungry. That's just part of the conversation around overconsumption. I think there's so many other areas like, poor quality access to food, the how much people can actually afford in terms of the food that they can find local to their area. There's the emotional component as well. There are all loads of issues going on with hormonal signaling, particularly with environmental pollutants. But I think a large part of that equation is actually breakfast protein and not starting your day off right, because then you're just on a roller coaster of hunger signals that are very hard to control if you haven't had a good start to the day.
And human clinical trials actually validate this by showing that when you front load your day with protein instead of the sugar and refined grains and whatnot, you actually end up consuming fewer calories over the course of the day.
Exactly, yeah. There's a number of different studies. One I really like actually came from a paper looking at a Chinese cohort, and they found that giving them eggs in the morning instead of a refined sort of rice-based meal that was low in protein actually led to them naturally consuming less calories during the day, which is a lovely experiment, because what it shows is that in a realistic environment that we all find ourselves in, you naturally crave less food, you will naturally consume less calories, ergo you're more likely to maintain weight maintenance or at a proper weight without really thinking about counting calories or measuring out food, which is a behavior that I don't think is actually conducive to long-term health, even though it might enable you to lose weight in the short term. So I think it's those kind of studies that I sort of like lean into more, and some that I discuss in the book as well, because if you just consume enough protein in the morning, what it states and what these studies show is that you will naturally be in a calorie deficit throughout the rest of the day, or just adjust your calories according to your natural hunger signals, which is a state that we all want to get to.
Of course, yeah. I think that calorie counting, tracking, whatever, because I mean, there's certainly a lot of people who do it and swear by it, particularly in like the bodybuilding fitness space. It's a way to hack your environment, but it's hacking the environment which has become saturated with ultra-processed, highly calorie-dense foods that tend to short-circuit your body and hijack your body's satiety signals.
Yeah.
But like if you're primarily focusing on whole foods, which I get it, there are hurdles to that. It can be easier said than done. But like that kind of renders the whole like the necessity for calorie tracking a bit obsolete. Because it's like, look at our ancestors. Like our ancestors were not 66% obese or overweight and obese like we see here in this country by tracking their calories. Like they weren't tracking their calories.
It shocks me every time I hear that stat around just how many people are classed as either overweight or obese in this country. And, UK is not far behind, right? And I think this idea of calorie counting as a means to address that is naive and short-sighted in many ways. Whilst I agree that we should be calorie aware, and I think almost as an exercise for a couple of weeks, tracking your calories so you understand, okay, where you might be over-consuming food that doesn't look like much in mass, but is actually quite a lot of energy, is a useful exercise, I think, for most people. However, the point that we want to get to is where we actually consume energy without really having to think about it, and that you actually get into calorie balance just as a nice side effect of consuming food. So there was wonderful studies looking at removing ultra-processed food and replacing it with whole foods. And what people find themselves naturally doing is just feeling fuller and feeling satiated, so they consume less food. And I think getting enough fiber as well as protein, which is why healthy high protein is all about the balance between getting enough protein, getting enough fiber, and eating in an anti-inflammatory pattern, that alone is enough to actually get yourself into weight maintenance and actually improve your long-term health outcomes and improve your long-term metabolism as well, which is what we should all be striving for within preventative medicine.
Amen. So when it comes to prioritizing protein in your diet, is there a certain daily numerical protein target that you strive for every day? How does it look when it comes to what you're filling your shopping cart with?
Yeah, it's a really good shot. So I would say, looking at the evidence, today's guidelines state that we should be consuming around 0.75 grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight per 24 hours, right? So this equates to around 50 grams of protein for a typical adult male in the UK, which I think is far below what we should be aiming for. If you look at the latest studies and protein researchers over the last 10, 15 years, they've all been sort of aligned around a number that is 50% more than that current guideline of 1.2 grams. So using the same context, this is going to 80 grams for a typical male in the UK. And because it's done by weight, then you can do the math, and I think it is worth doing a little bit of arithmetic for the same for females as well. So it's exactly the same 1.2. If you exercise, if you are over the age of 50, if you're postmenopausal, if you have sarcopenia, you should be looking at a minimum of 1.6. So that's double the current recommendations. And therein lies a bit of a conundrum, because there might be some extra benefits when you go to 2 grams. So for the Americans, I believe that's like per pound, so like 1 gram per pound of body weight. But this is where I think we risk going to the energy imbalance. So if you start consuming that amount of protein, particularly if you're getting it from animal-based products, you risk over-consuming calories, which we know is going to be at the detriment of your metabolism and your long-term health as well. So this is where I think a nice medium is anywhere between 1.2 and 1.6 grams of protein. So when I think about like my shopping list, in the mornings, I will have a high-quality Greek yogurt as an example. That generally has about 10 grams of quality protein per 100 grams, so I have about 150 grams of that. I'll add some nut butter to that, some tahini. I'll top it with nuts and seeds. I'll have it with blueberries. And if I need something extra on the side, I might have like an egg or two. And then for lunch, I'm either having like leftovers from the night before. That could be a chicken curry, it could be a casserole, it could be whatever eaten the day before. And then, like as an example, last night's meal was a side of salmon that had a bit of gochujang dressing in, a side salad, some chickpeas, and like herbs and spices thrown throughout the whole thing. So that is a healthy high protein meal because I'm getting enough fiber, so that's 30 grams. I'm getting enough protein for my needs, about 140 grams. So split across each meal, that's looking at about 45 grams per meal. And then I'm also having an anti-inflammatory meal pattern, which is exactly what I talk about in healthy high protein. You want to get that balance between, yes, protein requirements, but not everything at the expense of protein. Just like, the English breakfast example at the start of this, right? Because you could be consuming like 50 grams of protein in that, but are you getting enough fiber? Or if you put the beans on the side, probably not. Are you eating an anti-inflammatory profile? You're getting greens, you're getting herbs and spices, you're eating colorful vegetables? Probably not, apart from the grilled tomato that most people leave on the side. So you want to get a real balance between these three pillars. That way you can guarantee that you're eating according to your brain health, your heart health, your metabolic health, and longevity as well.
Yeah, I mean, protein is not the sole variable to define a healthy diet. I mean, otherwise, lean, skinless, boneless chicken breast, like you'd just be able to get by on that, and that would not a healthy diet make.
And you know what? This is a really good point you make about skinless, boneless chicken, because I think most people, when they think of high protein, think of exactly that. They think of chicken for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert, right? Like it's just chicken the whole way through. And then if you start tracking calories, all roads lead to that, with a bit of whey protein, like for snacks, right? And this is this like joyless, bland way of eating that most people fall into the trap of when they try and improve their health and they try and improve their weight, because every fitness influencer online is telling them to count their calories, make sure they're measuring their food, and ensuring they're getting enough protein. This is high protein. And what I'm suggesting is healthy high protein. You want to get the balance of protein and fiber and gut health and inflammation reducing potential of diet. So this is sort of what I want to get the message across. Like, it's not everything at the expense of getting enough protein. It's, you want to get a balance across those different pillars.
I think we're totally aligned there. Like I the value of phytonutrients, I think, cannot be overstated. Like, whether we're talking about plant pigments, even fiber, I think is super beneficial, super important. And micronutrients. I mean, like, that's why I think focusing on the most nutrient dense proteins that you can find, and then also not neglecting foods that are not necessarily high protein, like dark leafy greens, berries, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, we talk about protein, and I think most people think about muscles and meat. And when I think about protein, what I like to explain to folks is protein is just so much more than just our muscles. Granted, it is very important for muscular health, and I think skeletal muscle is definitely having a moment, and I think we need to be a lot more cognizant of that, particularly as sarcopenia, which is recognized as a muscle disease now. In Europe, 7 years ago now, there was a European working group looking to define sarcopenia and actually its causes. And primary sarcopenia, which is the progressive loss of muscle, is primarily related to aging and the disease process of aging. But there are secondary causes as well: insufficiency, poor appetite, malignancy, a whole bunch of other issues that can lead to muscle wasting. But when I talk about protein, I want people to recognize that protein is not just about muscular health. It's about your transporter molecules. It's about enzymes. It's about your cells, your bones, your hair, your nails. Like, protein is basically everything. And the analogy that I use in the book is using Lego. So Lego, the beauty of Lego was that even if you had enough pieces, and you only had 20 different types, you can build anything from a little toy car to like this magnificent Star Wars style spaceship, right? It was just incredible, like the amount of variety, the amount of stuff that you could build from Lego. Well, Lego are like the building blocks in the world of toys, and proteins are the building blocks in the world of biological materials. So using just the same sort of blocks of amino acids, of which there are 20 different types, although there is controversy as to whether it's like 22, 23, whatever. But using those building blocks, you can build enzymes, you can build collagen sheets, you can build bone, you can build muscle. And actually, when you break it down, only 25% of the protein that you consume goes to your muscles. The vast majority of the protein that you're consuming is actually going to all the other biological processes in our body. And the other fascinating thing is we actually recycle a lot of the proteins within our body. In fact, our liver is purposed with that role. We are constantly breaking down protein, particularly overnight in a fasted state, and then rebuilding that, particularly in the morning when we need to replenish this amino acid pool so we can build all these different things in our body. And so I want people to stop thinking about protein in the context of bodybuilding and aesthetics and muscular health, and start thinking about it in the context of hormones, of enzymes, of organs, of bone. These are all things that are really, really important. And I also think one of the things that is driving interest in protein is also this recognition that we should be paying a lot more attention to the menopause, because women, when they go past menopause or through the transition, have a lot of these issues that are in part down to protein misregulation and lack of protein in the diet. Their bones become more brittle, their hormones obviously crash, you lose a lot of skeletal muscle. There are obviously brain health repercussions of that. There are metabolic repercussions which can affect their cardiovascular risk. And I think this message needs to get out to this cohort of people even more so, because they stand to gain the most from it as well. And having so many women in my life that have gone through this process, like actually increasing protein in their diet has helped them immensely. And I know that's helping women across the world as well. So I think this idea of like protein and meat and muscle building, you know, all that stuff is great, but actually the majority of people who could benefit from more protein in their diet are the older age groups, and particularly women postmenopausally.
It's crucially important. I'm so glad that you brought that up. And also for aging men as well. I mean, men undergo andropause to some extent, right? Like men's testosterone decline, and then all aging humans tend to, I mean, there's this phenomena that's sort of people have been talking about over the past decade, this phenomena referred to as anabolic resistance, right? Like we become generally less sensitive to the amino acid leucine. Our digestion of protein begins to falter as we get older. So I mean, it just becomes even more valuable as you age.
Yeah. There's been these studies actually where they use protein isotopes. And essentially what they can do is put a tracer into like a glass of milk or whatever substrate they're using. And then you drink it and they can see exactly what goes on, how that protein turnover is occurring. And protein turnover is basically the balance between protein building and protein degradation. And what they found is when you look at two different cohorts of people, you've got healthy 22-year-olds and you've got healthy 75-ish olds, the capacity of the older group to build skeletal muscle in this case is far more diminished when you give them the same amount of protein. And it's because of this anabolic inflexibility, or this protein, the inability to respond to the same dose of protein in the diet. It's not to say that this older group can't build muscle. In fact, they've actually demonstrated that, but it just becomes a lot harder. So therein lies two solutions to this issue. One is increase the protein dose to have the same desired effect. And the other thing, which is probably the biggest lever, even though I've written a whole book about healthy high protein, it's about exercise, in particular resistance training. So you want to be able to stimulate that muscle with resistance training to enable it to become less inflexible to the protein dose. So when you consume enough protein, when you do resistance training, you can have that same desired effect on skeletal muscle. It's just obviously a bit harder for older age groups, which is why getting the message out to these folks about getting enough protein in a healthy way is something that I'm just super passionate about.
And also focusing on, at least to some extent, protein quality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea that protein quality doesn't matter, I think is flawed in a few ways. But I think it can be overstated in lots of ways as well. Because if we just focus on, maybe we should define what protein quality means. So protein quality is defined by a number of different indices and metrics, one of which is bioavailability of the aminos, and another one is the absorption as well. And there are various metrics. There's PDCAAS, there's DIAS, there's a whole bunch of scoring systems there. If we focus too much on these protein quality scores, all roads lead to whey protein, and all roads lead to lean chicken breast, basically, which we want to just be careful of. I'm not saying that those items don't deserve a place in our diet, but I just think we have to be careful about overinterpreting the quality scores.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. I got into it with a fitness coach actually online recently who pointed out that the PDCAAS, I'm not going to remember what the acronym stands for. It's like the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, something like that. Somebody will correct me. But they pointed out that the PDCAAS for collagen was 0. And I was like, why is that? And the implication was that it was a completely worthless protein. But I pointed out that the only reason why the amino acid score for collagen is given a 0 is because it has 0 tryptophan in it. So it's over penalized for the fact that it contains 0 tryptophan. But that doesn't mean that collagen is worthless. There's still many other amino acids in collagen. It's not considered complete because it doesn't contain tryptophan. But if you're consuming collagen as part of a diet that contains other whole food proteins, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Like there's absolutely no issue with that.
Yeah.
It's still completely utilized. It provides glycine. It's not as good in terms of stimulating muscle protein synthesis as a whey protein or a more complete protein like a chicken or beef or whatever, fish. But yeah, all that is to say that you're right that we can't get dogmatic when it comes to these protein quality metrics.
Yeah, the analogy that me and my team use internally is it's kind of like judging a team based on the worst player. So that worst player is always going to bring it. If you can have like when we play soccer in the UK, so you can have like the best 11-person team and the worst goalie. And that will just mark down the entire team. You can have the best striker. You can have Ronaldo. You can have Ronaldinho up front if you're still playing, whatever. So, you don't want to get too sort of carried away with these indices. They definitely have a purpose, I think, in directing, how you want to supplement a healthy diet. But I think that the protein quality sort of conversation, particularly online, focuses way too much on these numbers. And I think we need to think holistically about it. So within that vein, I think the easiest way to get enough protein in your diet is actually just focusing on animal-based products. So chicken, fish, even red meat. And
You're not a fan of red meat.
I am actually changing my mind on red meat quite a bit. So I spoke with Dr. Kevin Mackey on the podcast recently. So he's an epidemiologist. He's looked at a whole bunch of the different studies. And we broke down basically why the issues around red meat are perhaps overinterpreted very much in the similar way as this sort of protein quality index, right? Like how we can overinterpret certain issues. I still think that it's worth going for lean products where possible because it's very easy to overconsume saturated fat, and particularly if you are sensitive to saturated fat causing high cholesterol in your blood. It might be something to be aware of. Although he actually has a differing opinion on that as well. He's think the impact on cholesterol from red meat is so low, then we don't really need to worry about it. And actually, you could benefit from instigating a portfolio style diet and still have some red meat in it in your diet as well. So
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Also worth noting that lean red meat, or I don't even necessarily know that we need to qualify it with the word lean. Red meat, excluding mixed dishes, at least in the United States, makes up only 3% of the saturated fat intake for the average American. So
the contribution of saturated fat to the diet from red meat, I think, has been overstated in lots of circles. And actually, it's usually from mixed products, as they state in these studies. So things like baked goods, pizza, donuts, all that kind of stuff.
Lasagna.
Lots of saturated
burritos,
fat.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those come from things like butter and different types of fats like tallow and all the rest of it. Although we can talk about tallow a bit because the large majority of saturated fat in tallow is coming from stearic acid, which is similar to the saturated fat you find in chocolate, and that's actually been shown to be cardio-neutral and maybe even cardioprotective as well. It's still got palmitic, which we do know that does raise LDL-C and apolipoprotein B, but I think there's a place for all of these different products in our diet, and I like a nice fatty steak every now and then. Do I have this as part of my regular diet? No. I actually think it's part of like a sort of a luxury part of my diet. But
when we first met, you were not eating steak.
Oh, I was probably having steak once a month, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, but not regularly. Not regularly. No, it was a very much a luxury item.
Wow.
Yeah, very much a luxury item. Yeah.
So this is this is an evolution. I'm
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. I would say I probably have red meat once every 2 weeks or so. I don't rely on it for any of the extra B vitamins or choline. I think that's a nice to have. I tend to get my B vitamins from supplementation because it's just very hard to push up my B12 to where it needs to be. I don't need to take IM injections or anything like that, but I think I'm not relying on red meat for those reasons. And I think I'm also, given my heritage, I'm Indian on both sides, I think I'm uniquely susceptible to some of the components within red meat that might actually push me into a worse cardiometabolic profile. So I've definitely evolved in my thinking around red meat.
Wow, it's so cool.
And actually the average consumption of red meat, and we're looking at the average here, so there are definitely people that need to reduce their consumption of red meat and meat in general, and there are people that could benefit from actually having a little bit more animal products in their diet. But if you look at the average consumption, it's actually kind of in line with where the dietary guidelines should be. But there's only so much you can interpret from these large bodies of studies because people lie, people don't remember. We're basing this off food frequency questionnaires that are inherently flawed, which is why nutrition is just such a messy science. So I don't think we can be so dogmatic about recommendations and actually where people are at. I think everyone needs to take this information and personalize it to their own life. And then also use tracking investigations and conversations with your physician or nutritionist or dietitian to sort of guide what's best for you. So I can't remember how we got into this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
I can't remember what I was talking about. Was it red meat or?
It was about protein quality and why.
Oh, that's it.
Protein quality. As we get older, we're discussing anabolic resistance.
Yes.
And
Yeah. So protein quality absolutely matters. I am of the opinion that you can consume quote unquote incomplete proteins and still meet your total protein requirements per day. So I actually have quite a bit of my protein coming from plants still. So I choose to consume organic, clean sources of tofu and tempeh. Tempeh is quite interesting because tempeh is actually a fermented process. So you can tempeh soybeans, you can tempeh chickpeas, you can tempeh any sort of legume. What that fermenting process does is make those amino acids more bioavailable. It actually improves the digestibility, which is why it scores slightly higher on these scoring. Still not like as high as chicken, for example, which is like 95%. It's like mid 80s, high 80s. So I definitely consume a lot of that because there are other benefits like we were talking about earlier, the isoflavones, the different phytochemicals that confer anti-inflammatory benefits and may even be beneficial for our gut as well. I'll have nuts and seeds, so things like peanuts and almonds that tend to be of the higher protein variety. I'll have hemp seeds. Shelled hemp seeds actually have all 9 essential amino acids, which is really interesting in good amounts as well. And every now and then I will supplement with a protein powder. I personally choose a blend of pea and what else is in it? Pumpkin. Because it's independently lab tested to be free of heavy metals as well, because I think it's got a bit of rice flour in as well, which has some concerns depending on sourcing. But my preferred brand of protein actually go the extra mile, do the testing, and it's shown to be free of heavy metals. And I use that on days when I train just to make sure that I'm definitely hitting my protein requirements. But yeah, I'll have salmon, I'll have oily fish, sardines, herring, mackerel. I tend to sort of focus on the oily fish to get my protein as well because of the extra benefits that you get from the omega-3s. I will have some chicken, and I'll definitely have some red meat in the week as well. So probably once a week or once every 2 weeks. So it's a real a nice sort of blend of different proteins from different sources rather than just focused from one source. And I think that is a lovely way to make sure that you're covering all bases. You're getting enough of all those different amino acids in the pool, because I think there's this idea that you need to consume 100% good quality protein at every single meal. And actually what you're doing is just contributing to the pool of amino acids that your body breaks down and repurposes during every 24 hours. So that's sort of the picture of protein that I consume.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like,
and a bit of dairy as well.
With a bit of dairy.
Yeah, a little bit of dairy. A bit of Greek yogurt that's like strained in all the authentic Greek style. I'm Indian, so we have a lot of yogurt in our diet as well. So
if you're amenable to dairy, why then do you, for your protein supplementation needs, opt for like pea, rice?
For some reason, the whey proteins that I've tried just give me a bit of digestive discomfort.
Interesting.
And even the low lactose varieties as well. I'm not too sure why. It's just my experience. And you know what? It's the experience a lot of people have as well. Whether it's something to do with the processing, maybe it's the whey itself. I've tried casein as well. Again, similar issues. So I just opt for the plant-based variety.
I wonder if you have as many options in the UK as we do here. Like, I mean, here there are so many options. I would imagine that it's easy to find quality protein powder in the UK, but
yeah, I'm sure like we can usually Amazon it.
Yeah, you do.
What one do you opt for? Do you have like a preferred source or?
I feel that protein powder. I get asked all the time what my go-to powders are, and I work with a number on the podcast of great brands, Kion, Momentous. But to be totally transparent, I think that it's pretty easy to find a good quality whey protein isolate these days. You just want to make sure that, you know, while whey is easy to find, that there's not just a bunch of like junk additives added to the formulation. But again, I think it's like pretty easy to find a quality whey, like Kion, Momentous, they're all great. Yeah.
And just going on back to your point about collagen, actually, I agree. I think it's very easy to mark down collagen because it doesn't have, you know, tryptophan or whatever it is. And it's higher in glycine and proline and isoproline. I think the mechanism behind why collagen might be beneficial for things like joints and recovery and bones is sort of weird and mixed, and I haven't seen anything that gives me confidence in why when you consume collagen it sort of like magically appears in your ligaments and your actual collagen. But then when you look at some of the outcomes, it's kind of hard to ignore now that people are reporting that they are improving the ligaments and the recovery and all the rest of it, myself included, actually, when I experimented with collagen. And there are some really interesting outcomes looking at skin as well and hair and nails. So it's kind of hard to deny that collagen is doing something, but I haven't figured out exactly what the mechanism might be, because if you think about it, like whether you consume chicken or tofu or edamame or whatever it might be, your body's going to digest it into its, you know, different amino acids. And then depending on what your need state is, it's going to rebuild that into the proteins that you require, whether it's enzymes or hormones or whatever it might be. So why it would magically form itself back into collagen or into, you know, whatever it's, you know, bone or whatever, why that would happen, I can't explain, but something seems to be happening.
Yeah, I think it's important to remind people that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Like, just because we don't have, you know, super high quality studies to prove an effect doesn't mean that it's not doing anything. I mean, it still contains amino acids. It's still the top source of glycine. We produce a small amount of glycine in our bodies, but ancestrally it's speculated that we consumed about 15, 20 grams of glycine a day.
Oh, really?
And today we consume very little.
Oh, wow.
And glycine is really important. I mean, glycine is rate limiting in the production of glutathione. It's important for the synthesis of collagen. I mean, it's like one of the building blocks of collagen in our bodies. And meta-analyses do show that collagen supplementation can improve skin health and appearance. And like, you're literally just looking at the tip of the iceberg when you're looking at skin-related outcomes.
Yes.
Right? So it's like hard to imagine that it's not doing something in the body. Is it as good for it? Does it hold a candle to whey protein when it comes to stimulating muscle protein synthesis? Not at all. No, but that's not its purpose.
Yeah.
So my take on it is like, yeah, the bulk of your protein should not be coming from collagen. But if you use it as a tool for a specific goal or outcome in mind, I think that it's certainly not useless. Like, it's certainly not, you're not like, it is, you know, those amino acids are getting absorbed. I think from a longevity standpoint, I mean, I do think, and that there's a degree of speculation here, I will admit, but like I think glycine is important from a longevity standpoint, particularly if you're eating a lot of, Chris Masterjohn is a nutrition PhD whose work I've long looked up to and admired and respected, and he's talked about when you're consuming a lot of skeletal muscle protein, which is very high in methionine, there's a role for glycine in terms of balancing out how it's metabolized in the body.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's like a whole, mechanism there that like I can't recall off the top of my head, but essentially that glycine is really important when it comes to balancing out methionine, which has to be detoxed or something.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about it from an ancestral lens, and I'm constantly obsessed with how we've evolved and what our optimum conditions are, and I believe that's going to be different for different groups, but certainly we can all agree that our diet would have been very, very different, and we would have been relying a lot on things like nose to tail eating, broths, bringing a lot more than just skeletal muscle into the equation. Does that mean that we need to eat raw liver and all the rest of it? I don't think so. But I think definitely getting a mixture of all these different proteins in our diet is super important. And it's sort of what I'm trying to mirror with my eating pattern of getting a bunch from animal-based sources, a bunch from plant-based sources, and a bunch from dairy. And so that way you're sort of covering all your bases. And you know what? Within the context of modern life, where we are exposed to a lot more environmental pollutants, upregulating glutathione, with a bit of glycine or with some processed collagen, especially the hydrolyzed form, might be a good strategy, and to your point, for longevity as well. So I don't think there's any harm in taking it. There certainly doesn't appear to be any harms in taking collagen, although it really depends on the quality of what you're consuming. And I am a big fan of independent lab testing for any supplements that we take. And even with that, there's controversy as well. There's people like, providing fake tests. I don't know if you're aware of this whole creatine gummy scandal going right now.
I've heard, yeah.
Oh my God.
That there are terrible. Many brands, many of them actually don't contain any of certainly not they don't meet the claims.
I mean, I don't really personally understand the rationale for taking a sweet every day. I just grin and bear it when I take my creatine in my water in the morning.
Same.
I just, it's a bit powdery, whatever, but you just do it as a shot and it's fine. And you're getting all the benefits of having some creatine monohydrate in your
actually,
diet.
I will give you a use case that I came up with on a podcast recently, like just on the spot, which I think is actually, if we can, and I think, there's a guy on your side of the world. He's a trainer. What's his name? James Smith, maybe, a big jack dude. He did a video recently where he personally paid. He's Chris Williamson's partner in this. Like,
yes, the drink. The
Yes. Anyway, he, I think, paid to have a number of, somebody flagged this for me on Instagram, to have a number of these creatine gummies lab tested. And the vast majority of them didn't have what they said that they had on the label, but the brand Create did have a significant amount.
Okay.
And I have no affiliation with Create. And it also is comforting to know that Darren Crando, who's one of the leading authorities on creatine, he's like an advisor to the company. So I think there are some, you just have to be really careful, creatine gummies that have actual creatine monohydrate in them. But so here's the use case. There's now a growing body of literature suggesting that that creatine has cognitive benefits.
Okay. And
there was just recently the first ever pilot study published. It wasn't a placebo-controlled trial. It had a very small, N population, but it used creatine, a high dose of creatine, in patients with Alzheimer's disease, and it saw that they saw a cognitive benefit by using this cheap, widely available supplement, creatine, right? So my speculated, one possible use case for these gummies is like older adults, older people with like dementia that like don't necessarily want to be choking down 20 grams of sand every day. And also people with Alzheimer's disease, Alzheimer's patients develop a sweet tooth. Like they tend to crave sweet food. So what if you could just give, ultimately the research has to bear this out. And I'm not saying patients with Alzheimer's should run to take creatine yet. We don't have that level of data. But like down the road, like what if creatine gummies are something we could give to our grandparents to help their brains,
I definitely see that use case for sure. For the vast majority of people today, consuming creatine gummies, probably not applicable.
Right, not applicable.
It's, your fitness influencer, like taking a gummy in the morning with their matcha tea or whatever, just leave the sugar and just take the creatine out of the gummy.
Everything has become, there's like a gummy now for everything. And it is seductive, right? It's like, you don't have to take a pill anymore or powder. Like just take a whole bunch of like your morning supplement stack. It's just a whole bunch of gummies.
We're just all big kids, honestly. Like we're just adults roaming around the world pretending to be mature, but actually all we want is just gummies with like the good stuff in it. And if you convince us that there's creatine in it, we'll take it, even if there's no creatine in it whatsoever. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Well, I'm super excited for your book, Healthy High Protein. It's a cookbook. Do you have a favorite recipe?
Oh man, like there's so many. So I mean, I always do cookbooks, and the reason why is because I'm just obsessed with people enjoying health and wellness. It shouldn't be a chore to the point where you need to shove creatine into a gummy to actually enjoy it. It should be something that you are excited about. You actually like want to live this lifestyle, and that's why the recipes that I create are like full of cultural inspiration from all over the world. Like during my time as a general practitioner working largely in London, but I worked in Australia in ITU and emergency medicine as well, I was privy to so many people with different backgrounds, people from the Philippines, people from Korea, people from Sri Lanka. And, I'm not going to be suggesting a kale salad to these guys, right, with like a bit of chicken on the side. I'm going to be reflecting what they already consume, whether that's adobo or kimchi or, cashew curry, prawns, whatever it might be, depending on the culture, and make it healthier for them such that they don't have to make massive shifts in what they prefer to consume. It's actually like already in line with what they're eating. And so that's why the recipes that I create are like, they go through different cultures. So I just think it's the best way to enjoy food, just the sort of shared language of cooking. And so the recipes, whilst they are like high protein and healthy and all the rest of it, they are at its core like colorful and like enjoyable and easy to make. And every single recipe I've put the protein amount, the fiber amount per serving, and the plant points that is like a sort of proxy for the anti-inflammatory potential of each meal. So for example, we just opened the salmon squash and grilled peach salad with tahini herb dressing, which is actually one of my favorites.
Wow,
actually.
love it.
And this has got 42 grams of protein per serving. It's got 9.8 grams of fiber, which is, almost a third of your daily requirements. And then the plant points are around 6. So this is reflective of the herbs and spices that I've used, the greens, the peach, and all that kind of stuff.
What are plant points? Is that the number of plants that you're getting with
correct.
this dish?
Yeah,
cool.
the diversity of plants.
Wow.
Yeah, so plants and plant points are based on each individual ingredient that you're consuming. So watercress will count as a plant point. Arugula will count as a plant point. Peach will count as a plant point. And there are some studies that demonstrate that the high variety of plants that you consume on a daily and weekly basis correlates with a better microbial system, so a better gut health and all the rest of it. And these all typically tend to have a lot more fiber in as well. So it's like every recipe is geared towards getting enough protein, ensuring you get enough fiber, and getting enough diversity as well to reduce inflammation.
That's awesome. I love that you lay out like the number of grams of protein and fiber in each dish. When my cookbook came out, people were like, where are the macros? And I was like, it's not that kind of cookbook. I don't know, but super helpful because,
I mean, like I never really wanted to put like calories in, all that kind of stuff. But like for the Doctor's Kitchen app, which is where you can get like thousands of Doctor's Kitchen recipes, and we create like new ones every 2 weeks. Every week there was like 5 new recipes on the app. So we have like thousands of people using it around the world. We do put the full macros there and the calories and all the rest of it, but there is an easy function where you can hide that, because I know it can be triggering for some folks. But I was sort of against that, because I don't really want people to measure the quality of a meal based on calories. Because, you could be looking at like a 600 or 700 calorie meal per serving. You'd be like, gosh, I don't want to eat that. I don't feel like eating that. That's not going to be in line with my calorie consumption. But we know like the calorie number isn't reflective of the calorie absorbed. It depends on the fiber that you're consuming. It depends on like the speed of eating. There's obviously going to be issues with how those calories are actually measured and actually indicated, particularly on packets as well. There's a degree of error. And I just don't think it's a great way of valuing your meal and your plate. So that's why I've generally been against that, but we do have that on the Doctor's Kitchen app.
Yeah, calories are, I mean, I think as you said earlier, it can be a very illuminating experience to just audit what it is that you're eating and get a sense of the varying calorie densities of modern foods. I think that can be very educational. If you've never done it, I think that could be super useful. But you're totally right that the body is not a calorimeter, and various foods, I mean, impact your metabolism, your satiety differently. I don't even necessarily think, I mean, this is going to be super controversial, but I don't even know that protein calories should be counted as a form of energy. Protein is not utilized as energy by the body, and not easily anyway. Your body doesn't want to use, protein is so valuable, as you said. I mean, it makes up the structure of your body, your muscles, everything. Fat and carbohydrates, fair game for, use as an energy substrate. But protein, there have been a number of small studies, or maybe just one, but we talked about it recently on the show, where people were placed into a calorie surplus by overfeeding them protein, and contrary to all of the expectations of the researchers, they didn't gain fat.
Really?
When they were eating primarily, when the calorie surplus came from protein.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what source of protein they were using, because when I think about food, a lot of people think of, and this is another thing that I wanted to sort of discuss in this book, a lot of people think of tofu as protein or chicken as protein, and then you actually break it down. It's it does have a lot of protein in, but it's not the only thing. There is some fat in there, there will be some carbohydrates in there, particularly plant-based protein. So I wonder if they're just feeding them whey protein, a pure source of protein.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you could get fat eating only ribeyes, because there's fat in ribeyes. But if we're just talking about the protein itself, I mean, almost a third of the calories that you ingest from protein are burned off in the digestion of protein
This
alone.
is why I think actually having, if you are in the business of improving weight and body composition, increasing your protein intake is going to be beneficial because of a number of reasons. One is the thermic effect of food. So 20 to 30% of the calories within the protein that you're consuming is going to be used to metabolize and assimilate those amino acids into proteins further down the line. But then also, when you consume protein, you're signaling satiety to your brain via GLP-1, which is naturally produced in the digestive tract. And then you have ghrelin as well, so which is reduced. So there are a whole bunch of different things that occur when you consume more protein in your diet that naturally put you into a state where you're not going to be consuming more calories, and actually you're utilizing some of those calories as well.
Can you, because you just touched on it, which is so interesting, the relationship between protein and GLP-1. And Ozempic and Wegovy and these revolutionary weight loss drugs.
Yeah, because I mean, so my perspective on GLP-1 is it's naturally produced. It's a peptide hormone. I know people are obsessed with peptides right now. When you consume not just protein but also fiber, which is why protein and fiber at breakfast is so important, this will signal to your these incretin hormones, so GLP-1, which goes to your brain, which signals to shut off the satiety signals, which means that you're shutting off your ghrelin production, which means that you don't have that desire to consume food as much. For some people, this feedback loop is dysregulated for a number of reasons. But one thing that we've definitely seen with the introduction of these new pharmacological agents is when you give macro pharmaceutical doses of GLP-1, you are essentially creating chemically induced anorexia. So, and this is the vernacular that I'm using very intentionally, because I don't think this is hyperbole. I think this is how we should approach this, because these are very effective drugs. They have an incredible use case, and I think they're going to be very, very valuable for lots of people, but we don't want to misuse them. And I think there are a lot of questions about people who are mildly overweight using these GLP-1 drugs as a means to lose weight and improve their health in the long term. But when you give these macro doses of GLP-1, it just shuts off your appetite, which means that you're less likely to consume and overconsume food. the reasons that we touched on earlier as to why people overconsume food in the first place are very, very mixed. Some people eat out of emotional dysregulation. Some people do have issues with their hormones as well, which are dysregulated. So this negative feedback loop. But we do know that like GLP-1s are really, really effective. My worry is that when you underconsume food, you are putting yourself at risk of not consuming enough protein and fiber for your requirements. And whenever you look at these studies, they weren't just giving them the pharmaceutical. They were giving them the pharmaceutical and healthy eating and lifestyle advice. These guys were, these women and men were training, they were exercising, they were given dietary advice. And in isolation with these drugs alone, we don't actually know what's going to happen. And so this is why I think it's really important for people to mimic the lifestyles and mimic the dietary interventions that these folks were given in the trials that we are basing a lot of the evidence, basing a lot of the recommendations on.
Wow. So is GLP-1 uniquely then sensitive to protein? Or are there other macronutrients or even
fiber?
Fiber
is huge, man. Yeah. So when you consume enough fiber, this is why actually when you move from ultra processed foods to whole foods, part of the reason why you naturally put yourself into a calorie deficit is because of the impact on your satiety hormones as a result of GLP-1 being produced naturally in your digestive tract. So it's like everyone's sort of on the GLP-1 train, but like there are some natural ways in which to stimulate this very important peptide that is just part of your normal sort of calorie regulation system, which is why like healthy high protein is about protein, but it's also about fiber and it's also about the anti-inflammatory perspective of your diet as well. So yeah, man, like, yeah, having enough fiber in your diet is going to naturally produce that GLP-1. It's going to make you feel less hungry, more satiated, and naturally eat less.
Are you a fan of fiber supplements, or would you prefer to get your fiber from food?
I think it's funny. I've spoken to a number of different microbiome researchers on the Doctor's Kitchen podcast, and a common theme involves they all tend to be having some sort of fiber supplement in the morning. So whether that's inulin or chicory root or psyllium husk. I'm actually a big fan of psyllium husk. I think it's great. It's Plantavartum ovata or something like that. It comes from an area in North India / Pakistan. And it's a plant that has like incredible soluble fiber components to it. There's been clinical studies looking at supplementing with psyllium husk, which is either in a granulated or powdered form. And it makes, when you add it to water, it makes it very viscous. So it's kind of icky to eat, which is why I put it in my gluten-free bread. So I get like a good dose of like 5 to 10 grams of psyllium husk every day just by having a slice of my bread. And this has been shown to improve weight control, I think naturally because people tend to eat less, because there is something going on with GLP-1 production, but also, you know, the actual physical bulking effect of the psyllium husk when you consume it as well. There's also favorable microbial effects, so you're crowding out some of the pathogenic bacteria that naturally live within us with other sources of microbes. Just the impact on leaky gut as well. So colloquially called leaky gut, actually intestinal hyperpermeability. So when you consume psyllium husk, it improves that mucin layer that is sort of like coating the insides of your intestines, which improves the barrier defenses of microbes that normally and can safely live in the lumen of your digestive tract and not cross that barrier where it can cause a bit of inflammation around the intestines and can cause systemic inflammation as well. So yeah, I'm a big fan of psyllium husk. I'm on the fence about inulin and chicory root as like a general supplement. I can see why it might be beneficial, particularly if people are using it therapeutically, but the majority of your fiber should be coming from different subtypes that you can get from plants. So green leafy vegetables, lentils, beans, like legumes in general, peanuts, nuts and seeds. These all have different types of fibers. And I'd rather get variety for the reasons that we know, which is variety of different fibers is actually favorable for our gut microbes.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Whenever I've overconsumed like ultra processed foods that tend to be, they'll utilize some of these fiber extracts like chicory root or whatever.
Yeah.
I just get so bloated.
Yeah.
And, but that doesn't happen to me when I supplement with psyllium husk. Psyllium husk, I think, is like the gold standard fiber supplement. I mean, there's a ton of research on it.
I love it. I mean, like, it's a natural whole product that is minimally processed compared to some of the others, like inulin, for example, which is extracted from,
like Jerusalem artichoke or whatever. Yeah, exactly, psyllium husk is just like the ground up husk.
Exactly. Yeah.
The psyllium. I don't even know what that is.
And it's so versatile as well. You can use it in baking and bread making, all that kind of stuff, or you can just fling it in some water and just have it that way, which can be a bit troublesome for a lot of people. I mean, it's a bit icky. It's kind of like and if you've come across CMOS and
it's like just like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of these products that are being touted as really healthy for us. And you know what? There probably is some evidence for some of these purely because of the fiber. And just going back to the GLP-1 conversation we're having, this is kind of where I think there might be actually value in multivitamins, in fiber supplements, and in protein supplements. Because if you don't have that desire to consume and your appetite is artificially suppressed to that amount, then you're kind of going to be relying on some of these products to ensure that you're consuming enough. The one worry I have I have many worries with GLP-1, but the core worry I have with people utilizing these drugs and under consuming food in general is the impact it may have on sarcopenia. So this progressive skeletal muscle disease, which is what it's considered to be now. Because if you're not consuming enough protein and you're not getting enough energy, you're not going to be working out your muscles as much as you can. You're not going to be doing as much resistance training. You're going to be under fueling for any exercise activity. This is going to accelerate potentially the decline in your muscle bulk that we know occurs naturally as a side effect of aging. And if you think about what sarcopenia is, it's the progressive loss of muscle strength, size and mass and quality. All those things will decline if you're not consuming enough protein and you're not exercising. So that's a big worry and a bit of a question mark. But I think, you can probably already see, like, the pharmaceutical companies are investing heavily in PR, which is why we have all these studies showing, okay, it's not only good for type 2 diabetes, but it's also good for cardiometabolic disease. It's good for dementia. It cuts dementia risk by 1/3 now. So whilst all these might be true, I think that the nuance and the context really does matter. And also how we get people off GLP-1s is a bit of a black box for me as well. I mean, I've had, not only patients, but friends who have been on GLP-1s and incredible results. Their resting heart rate reduces, their lean mass improves, they did all the right things, they were exercising as well. But the majority of people, I don't think, are doing it in that strategic way, where they're using investigations and they're actually taking a real sort of data-driven approach to this drug. They're just sort of using it as a means to lose weight, and that's it. And, as long as the number is going down the scales, that's fine. But I think we need to be really careful about any drug that we use, but particularly these new class of agents.
No, amen. They're incredibly powerful. And so they need to be given with education. Like, you can't just put it in the water, as I feel like many people today are suggesting we may as well go and do. I mean, I'm glad that we have them as a fail-safe, but yeah, it's these types of drugs are a double-edged sword, like any tool. You just have to be careful with how you use them.
I feel like the conversation we have about drugs can be quite binary as well. It's like putting it in the water. Like, people used to say that about statins as well. Oh, just put it in the water, it's fine. And whilst I think there is 100% a use case for statins and cholesterol-lowering therapy, I don't think we can be so brash as to suggest that we should put it in the water, which is why you have these different voices online, talking about how bad these drugs are, uniformly. And actually, it's not black and white. Like, there is the whole bunch of gray in the middle, and I think we should be reflective of not only the different voices, but also how we can personalize this for the person in front of you. Which, from my experience as being a doctor for over 15 years, I've had those one-to-one conversations where I look at the evidence, I look at nutritional medicine interventions and I can sort of personalize it to the person in front of me, which may or may not be according to guidelines as well. So yeah, I think it's more conversations like that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks for bringing nuance to the table along with all of your delicious, healthy, high-protein recipes in your new book. Yeah, very, very excited for word to spread about it because it's a beautiful book. The photography is amazing.
Thanks.
And it's also like front-loaded with all of this really valuable information too, which I think is really cool. It's not just it is an amazing cookbook, but it's also it's like a wellness guide, which I think is super cool.
Appreciate that, man.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out. Remind my listeners
brother.
where they can pick up your book, where they can find you on social media, and then I just got one last question for you.
Yeah, sure, man. So you can find me on Doctor's Kitchen. You can find the app at thedoctorskitchen.com, the book online, on Amazon. I think it might be in Barnes & Noble or whatever bookstores you have over here. I'm not too sure, actually. But you'll be able to find it if you just type in healthy high protein.
What's the Barnes & Noble equivalent over where you are? Waterstones?
Waterstones,
Waterstones.
Yeah, Waterstones. I love the accent.
Shout out to, how do you say it?
Waterstones.
Waterstone.
Water, yeah.
Love it. Well, last question. I feel like when you were on the last time, it was so long ago. We recorded the last time you were on the show when I was over there in London.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear how people's responses change to what does living a genius life mean to you?
Oh man, I think it's changed a lot because I had my 8-month-old recently, and I also went on. My wife had our 8-month. I want to emphasize that point. And I also went on a silent retreat earlier this year, which no talking, no writing, no listening, no digital devices, obviously.
And you're eating steak.
And I'm eating steak now as well. So I think like living a genius life for me is in harmony with all my different responsibilities and also true to what makes me healthy and happy. So eating well, waking up early, being present for my family, and living in alignment with my purpose, which is to educate as many people into the power of nutrition and food as medicine as possible.
Beautiful. You're doing that. You're living your purpose.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for coming out. Thank you,
course.
guys. Share this episode, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.